All right, let's start this. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, and just appreciate your faithfulness, your diligence. It's encouraging to me just to know you willing to listen to me each week and still showing up. So appreciate that. I pray often for you guys. I know you're going through a lot of challenges, both just with the virus in your own lives, with your health, and with the church. It's just a lot of challenges. So please do not hesitate if you have prayer needs to let us know. You can post them on the group, Facebook group, so we can be praying for each other if you have specific needs you'd like to share. Or you can just message me personally if you would prefer that. But I'd like also, just for our group to not only we're learning some things together, but also to be lifting each other up in prayer, especially right now in current circumstances. So, okay. All right. Well, let me pull up our notes here. Let's see, we'll do this. All right. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. And let's see. All right, here we go. Okay. Well, today I promise you no diagram today. All right, we finished our review for that last week, but I did want to do a couple of the remaining steps just as a review so that you can refresh your memory on these, and to show you that there are some just slight differences when we look at poetry compared to narratives or epistles in these remaining steps. As I mentioned to you the last couple of weeks when we looked at the block diagram, I mentioned to you how there are some things to be aware of when you're diagramming poetry. One of them is the ellipsis that takes place in poems. And so sometimes words or phrases might be omitted that are supposed to be there, and you have to keep that in mind in the diagram. I think we saw one example where the verb was elided, it was taken out, but we know it was intended to be there based upon the parallelism in the verse. And then there were a few examples where conjunctions were not in the text explicitly, but we know from the flow of the stanza that the idea was there, that the conjunctions and, for. So those are some things that are a little bit different with poetry. You have to keep that in mind. There'll also be a few slight differences or additional things to consider when we do the remaining steps, particularly with textual observations, which we're going to do right now. You don't have the list of things to look for is not as extensive as it was for narrative and epistles. And then when we get to the word study step, keeping in mind there with the word study that the word you're looking up may also have a figurative idea. And so that needs to be kept in mind when you're dealing with poetry. So there's just a few slight considerations to keep in mind when we're doing poetry for these remaining steps. So today, what I'd like to do is just review the textual observations, and maybe we'll get to word study as well. This will be part of the next assignment that is due, is combine your diagram, textual observations, and word study together. So you'll do all of that for one assignment, all right? For your passage, your Psalms passage. And then, Lord willing, if there's a little time at the end, I'll talk to you about our schedule. I had just a few class-related announcements before we finish this morning, okay? So let's get right to it. Again, notice we're just following with our exegetical process. And again, it's very similar to what we've looked at for narratives and epistles. The only main difference being that there's a poetic analysis step that we spent a lot of time doing. But then we go after that to the structural or block diagram. And then now today, once you finish the diagram, the next step is textual observations. And again, if you'll remember that textual observations have the idea of looking at, focusing attention on some specific grammatical elements of the text. We've already considered a number of them in doing the diagram, but these are some specific things to, after you completed the diagram, to go back and look at the passage and look for very specific things. Among the list would be looking at the verbs. What kind of verbs are they? We'll talk about that in a minute. Then considering the pronouns. Usually, most passages in scripture, there will be a number of pronouns. Well, what are those pronouns? Who do they refer to? That's what's important. Also, we'll look at repetition. Oh, let's see, no, we've already done that. It's another one is, okay, are there any conditional statements in the passage, in the poem? Are there any purpose or result statements in the poem? That you're going to want to look for those. Let's see, trying to remember the other ones. Oh yeah, and then finally, the conjunctions. All right, now again, you may be saying, well, didn't we already talk about that or think about that with the, when we did the diagram? Well, yes, but in this step, it's to really sort of identify it again, looking at the passage and trying to see how these things relate. So let me just go through and we'll review the elements, key elements for each of these, and then do an example together, Lord willing. And if you'll remember, when we did narratives and when we did epistles, this list was like 10 or 11 things to look for. We also included things like repetition, lists. What else did we? Oh, I'm trying to remember. There were like 5 more items. But in this case, a number of those we already considered when we, in previous steps, when we did the poetic analysis, we looked at repetition, for example. Oh, figurative language was another one that we typically would do in epistles and narratives. Well, we've already done that in poetry. Figurative language, as I said, lists, repetition. Okay, these are some things that we've already accomplished. So for poetry, under textual observations, you're just going to want to focus on those 5. Verbs, pronouns, conjunctions, conditional statements, and purpose result statements. Okay, so let me go through these and hopefully refresh your memory. We'll do an example together. If you have any questions, of course, on the way, please ask. The first one and the most important, just as in with epistles, are the verbs. As you look at a stanza, the verbs are key to the interpretation because they drive the action or they move the passage, understanding the author's meaning in the passage. And so each verb needs to be examined and looked at its various components. Now, we've talked about this when we did diagramming. There are 2 general classes of verbs in English: verbs of action and verbs of being. Verb of action is where the subject does an action, right? I hit the ball. In this case, hit, right, is a verb of action. The subject is doing something. The second kind of verb is a verb of being or a verb of state or condition. It's not describing an action, it's describing a state. I am happy. All right. So am is just telling the condition of the subject. Hit is telling an action from the subject. All right. So this is an action from the subject. Subject's doing an action. In the second case, it is the condition of the subject. Okay. So that's the distinction here. And we spent a lot of time, I can try to find the sessions we did these on, but we spent a lot of time talking about this. But so these are the 2 general classes of verbs in English, and also 2 in Greek. Greek, there are verbs of action and also verbs of being. Same in Hebrew. Hebrew has a verb of being and in verbs of action. So It's the same idea in those languages. Now, in addition to these two general classes, verbs of action and verbs of being, every verb has three characteristics. And now, again, we're focusing on English here. It would be similar in Greek. There would be three characteristics as well. And what are those three main characteristics? So I just wanted to ask you guys, see if anybody remembers. Do you remember the characteristics of the verb? Anybody? Want to take a guess, or do you remember? I'll give you a hint. Oh. Go ahead, Bernardo. Can you say it a little louder?
Present tense, past tense.
Tense? Yes, good. So verbs have tenses, right? That's when the verb happens in time with reference to the speaker. Okay, the speaker or the subject, you could say as well. Okay, and in English, there are three tenses. What are they?
Yeah. Past tense,
present, and future.
present tense,
Good.
future tense.
Past, present, future.
Yeah.
Now in English, there's also some other ones. We didn't spend a lot of time looking at the perfect tense. There's a couple
Future,
others,
perfect.
but our focus was mainly on the past, present, and future. The perfect tense is usually in the past as well, but didn't spend time on it. We're just going to focus on these three. Okay. So every verb in English will have a tense, and it'll be past, present, or future. In Hebrew, there's only two tenses in Hebrew. Right? You may think, oh, I want to study Hebrew. There's only two? Well, actually, it makes it a lot harder. There's the imperfect tense and the perfect tense in Hebrew. All right? And Hebrew can be very difficult to translate because these tenses are not in relation to time. They're in relation to the type of action in the verb. So it can be a little bit complicated in Hebrew. Greek, there are a lot more tenses. I think there's 7, if I remember right. But Greek, I think, is easier because of the number of tenses. You can be more precise. So in Greek, there's present, there's aorist, there's future, there's perfect. Let's see, pluperfect, imperfect. I think there's one more. All right. Now, for us, don't worry about all those. I'm just trying to let you know that the languages, Hebrew, Greek, and English, do have it function similarly with regard to there's being each verb has a tense. Now, what kind of tenses there are different with each of those languages. Aramaic as well. Aramaic, this is Hebrew. Aramaic has 2 tenses, but there's also something a little different about Aramaic regarding the tenses that I'm not going to get into because it won't help our discussion too much here. But all this is to say that we have in each of these languages, there is such a thing as a tense. Now in English, tenses are very specific in relation to time. In Hebrew, the connection to time is more difficult. You have to see it from the context. For example, when many prophetic passages in Hebrew, actually, normally the perfect tense is translated as past. The imperfect is often translated either as present or future. But what's interesting is in prophetic text in Hebrew, often it is written in the perfect tense, even though it's referring to a future event. So it makes it a little bit complicated. That's why a lot of guys in seminary had a lot of friends. They said Greek was a lot easier than Hebrew for them because Hebrew is just some challenges with being able to interpret based upon the context. So again, we don't have to worry about that. We're not focusing on Hebrew or Greek in this class, but I just wanted you to make aware and to know that there are some connection points within the languages. So what we learn in English can somewhat be applied in these other languages as well. And so that's why the English translations, especially the New Testament translation in English, is a pretty good representation of the Greek text, grammatically speaking. All right. Okay. Well, enough of that. All right. So tense, that's one of the characteristics of verbs in English. What's another characteristic?
Mood.
Mood. Good. Oh, before we get to that, let's look at a couple of examples here of the tense. All right, just to cover these. We have, here's the English tense, and then for a verb of action, I kicked the ball with the ed ending. The ed ending indicates a past tense action, that the action took place in the past with reference to the subject. The subject did an action prior to him making this statement. Okay? Now, past tense in a verb of being would be I was happy, which may imply he's no longer happy. But he says, in a past time, I was happy. Now, you would need the context to determine when he was happy. Was he just happy a minute ago, an hour ago, a year ago? We would need more information of when that time was. Present tense, verb of action. I kick the ball. And then future tense is I will kick the ball. All right. Now notice the features here. For a verb of action, typically a past tense verb will have that ed ending. Okay. That'll indicate a past action. The present tense will just have the verb in its root form. And the future tense will often have the verb in its root form along with the helper verb. In this case, the verb will or shall. I shall kick the ball. I will kick the ball. The event hasn't happened yet, but in the mind of the speaker, he's planning to carry out that action.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is for a verb of action. So these are things to look for. The ed ending indicates action in the past. The helper verb will or shall indicates, and this is just in English, a future action. In Greek, the past tense or aorist and the future tense have their own endings. So the word will look different depending on the type of tense. And then the present tense will just be the root verb, the verb in its root form. Okay. Now, this isn't the case for every single word. As you guys know with English, there's all kinds of exceptions. That's what makes English so hard, so challenging. So for example, the word sat, right? I sat down. That could be present or past tense, right? So, or I sit down, that's normally the present tense. Or I will sit down. Okay, notice the past tense, I sat down, is not I sitted down. All right, that's not the case in English. The word sit, the past tense is sat, not sitted. All right, so that's one thing. Or I set the plate on the table. All right. I will set the plate on the table. Or in past tense could be I also set the plate on the table. Or in present tense, you may say I'm setting the plate on the table. All right. So I'm just telling you, there are sometimes certain words in English that don't follow the pattern I told you above, but most do. All right. And you guys, as you know, learning English, you just have to, as you see these special cases, you just have to remember them, unfortunately. All right. But generally speaking, the past tense verbs have an ed ending. The present tense verbs is just the verb itself in its basic form. And then the future tense normally has will or shall. okay, for most verbs, most action verbs. Now, for verbs of being, it's just the verb comes in a different form. There's no ed ending for a past tense. So for example, I was happy is a past tense for I am happy, which the future tense is I will be happy. Okay, so notice these three verbs are a different form. That's just the way it is for verbs of being. Okay, we don't say I is happy. We say I am happy in English, and we don't say I am happy for past tense. Okay, there is no amed word. It's I was happy. Again, that's just the idiosyncrasies, the unique features of English that you just have to remember. Okay, but for the future tense, notice the helper word will is there. You almost always see that in English. I can't think of an example of a future verb that doesn't have the helper will or shall. Okay. All right, any questions on that? If this is something you already know well, I'm sorry. I just want to be thorough and just make sure if there are any questions, please ask on that. Okay, so that's the tenses of English verbs. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And if you do have a question, do not feel dumb about asking, okay? Because if you have the question, I'll bet someone else does too. All right. So don't feel like oh, I should know this. Be embarrassed. Ask me a question if you have one. Okay. Now,
That's very important, Pastor Tim. This is very important to be reminded of because we don't memorize them.
yeah,
Really good.
yeah. It's just it's it's looking for patterns, and obviously there are always exceptions, and English is known for that. Many exceptions to the rule. Sometimes there's so many exceptions, you really wonder if there's a rule in some cases, but these are just what I just try to explain to you is what is generally true most of the time. Okay. Now, somebody mentioned a second. So not only do we have tense, past, present, and future in English, those are the primary tenses. We also have what is called a mood. Okay, the mood of the verb. Does anyone remember what some of the different moods of the verb were?
Indicative mood.
Yeah,
Imperative
there's the
mood.
indicative
Subjunctive mood.
mood. Okay, oh, I'm sorry. Before we get to that, I should have said this. Now, mood. Remember, tense gives the verb the time element of the verb in relation to the speaker or the writer. The mood gives the speaker's attitude towards the subject in this case. All right, so or the topic maybe, or the sentence or the statement, maybe that's a better way to say it. All right, so there are different moods. For example, as Michael just mentioned, indicative. Okay, Michael, do you remember what kind of mood this is? What is the indicative mood?
Expression of fact, emphasize certainty of what was happened, something like that, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, it's a statement of reality or even certainty, right? And we'll look at some examples in a minute. Now, what's another mood?
Imperative mood.
Okay, there's an imperative mood. Now, what's an imperative?
Expresses a command, something,
Yes.
or request.
It's a command. Yeah, it's not a request or a question. Though at times you may word a command in the form of a request, or like, for example, you might say to your child or to someone who's visiting you, you might say, sit down. Or if you want to be more polite, you might say, sit down, please. Okay. Both of these are imperatives. The verb sit is an imperative, but the second statement is a little bit more of a polite imperative, okay? It's not a command, sit down, all right? It's, sit down, please. So what we would see is the verb would be in the form of an imperative, but the tone would be a little bit different, okay?
So it will show us a strong emotion or not, something like that,
Yes.
or not.
And what's the way you can tell?
By using a, what do you call that, a, and at the end, like apostrophe, I know, what do you call that?
Oh, the word please here?
No.
That
Sit down. If you,
oh, you mean by
if you have
by
strong
the
emotions, like
like
a,
if I put the exclamation point?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or the context, right? So all I gave you here, but what if I had said, I'm speaking to my child and I said, sit down, young man. You are in trouble. Okay. So that tells us the tone here is, right? Sit down. Or it could be, maybe you invited a guest over, right? And dinner is ready. Please sit down. Okay, the tone there is not harsh or angry. All right, and we know that because we're given more words, we're given a context. So the context will tell you the tone. But the verb itself, in both of these cases, the verb sit here would be in the imperative, because it's not asking a question and it's not making a statement of reality. It's not describing and it's not saying that the person sat down. It's commanding or asking them to. Now, if I had said he sat down, okay, that it would be indicative, because that's making a statement of fact. That's telling us what happened. Okay. But in this form, sit down, that is a command. It hasn't happened yet. I'm telling the person to do something. All right. Okay, and I mentioned this because we might also say it this way. You might have a command like this: let us sit down for dinner. This also is in the command form of a command. The subject is us, and the word let us sit. So let sit is the verb here, and that is in the form of a command, but it's a command for all of us. All right, this first command, sit down, young man, the implied subject is you, person you're talking to. But sometimes a command can be in the form of a first person, let us sit down for dinner. Okay, but all of these are in the imperative, but this last one is in the indicative, because it's making a statement of fact, an assertion, a declaration. Whereas these first three are commands. They are the subjects being told to do something. Here, the subject is doing or has done or will do something. So it's a statement of reality. Okay? All right. Questions on that?
clear.
And again, by talking about these moods, these same moods appear in Greek. All right? Greek verbs have a tense and they have a mood. And the moods they have are the same as in English. There's an indicative mood in Greek, and there's an imperative mood in Greek, and there's a third mood that also starts with I. Anyone want to take a guess?
Subjunctive.
Oh, well, that one too. There's subjunctive. All right, good. All right, who can tell me what is a subjunctive mood?
It expresses not certain, being not certain,
Probability.
or
Probability.
contrary to
Yeah,
fact.
it's an expression of uncertainty. That it's a possibility. It's not a certainty.
Mm.
Okay. So he sat down, that's indicative, that's a statement of certainty, right? It's telling us something that happened. But what if I had said, he might sit down?
Maybe
Okay,
he will sit down.
there is some uncertainty here. I don't know if he's going to do it. I'm not sure. Or in English, you might also say he may sit down. Or perhaps he will sit down.
Maybe he will sit down.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Okay, these are all words that indicate, in English, they would indicate some degree of doubt. Now in Greek, you don't have these helper verbs like might or may. In Greek, it's just the way that the verb is written, the letters that are added onto it, the form of the verb will tell you if it's subjunctive. In English, you have helper verbs like might and may, maybe. Okay, so subjunctive is some degree of uncertainty. And then finally, there is the last one. It also starts with an I.
Interrogative.
Yes, good. What is an interrogative, Alan?
It's a form of it's a statement that no. Interrogative, it question.
Yeah, you can say it's a question. All right, or an expression. Yeah, it just expresses a question or request. So for example, right, will you sit down? Or did he sit down? Okay, so obviously in English, the question mark is a indicator of the fact that it's a question. In Hebrew, there's actually a separate word. It's a particle that is included in the sentence that will tell you it's a question. In Greek, it's based on the context, whether or not it's considered a question. All right, so these are the four. Now, some people add a fifth one. You might see it if you looked up some English grammar book. It might say conditional as a fifth mood, whereas this expresses certain requirements for an action to happen. But I really think that this conditional clauses are more, they typically will modify a verb, right? Because usually, let's see, say for example, if I come to dinner, or if I come to dinner, eat with me. All right, well, the main verb here is eat in the sentence, right? And here it's in the form of a command, right? Eat is an imperative. Now, there's a conditional statement here, if I come to dinner, but the verb come here is not conditional in its mood. Come here would be indicative. All right, here eat is imperative. All right, so I don't really see a conditional mood as myself, all right, because normally the main verb is not in the conditional statement. So some people do, but I don't think that's a correct approach, because in a conditional statement you have an additional verb, additional clause here. If I come to dinner, eat with me. Let me give you another example. If I come to dinner, will you eat with me? Okay, again, the main statement here is in the form of an interrogative, right? It's a question with a condition on it. So still, if you're evaluating the verb eat, you wouldn't say it's a conditional verb. You would say it's interrogative because it's a question. Okay. So I don't really think conditional makes sense, but these four are moods that we're going to look at. All right. I don't know. Did I confuse you guys with that? Does that make sense? We don't have conditional verbs. We have conditional statements that will modify a verb, but the verb itself is not conditional. Again, eat. Eat with me. Eat is not a conditional verb. It's in the imperative mood, but the command is based on a condition if I come to dinner. But still, the verb itself is not a conditional verb. It's an imperative. Or in this case, will you eat with me? The verb eat is not a conditional verb. It's a interrogative mood. Okay? There is a condition to the action, but that doesn't make the verb conditional. So does that make any sense? Just keep going. So we'll leave conditional when we do diagram. So if I were to do the diagram for these, this is how I would do it. If my statement is, if I come to dinner, eat with me is the main clause. Okay, so that would be here, and the implied subject is you. And then if modifies eat. Okay, the verb will happen if this condition is met. So this condition modifies the verb eat. All right, so we would say this clause is conditional, but we would not say eat is conditional because eat is in the form of an imperative. All right, questions? All right, I don't know if that was helpful or not, or confusing or not. If you're not following closely with me, don't worry about it. Just focus on these four moods: indicative, imperative, subjunctive, interrogative. Okay, James, did you have a question? No. Okay, sounds like the rooster did. You'll have to answer the rooster's question later. All right. Okay, so let's look at a few examples here for different moods. All right. And again, I'll look at the two classes of verbs, the verb of action, the verb of being, give you an example from each. So we're sticking with the kicking action here. An indicative mood would be I kick the ball. All right, that's giving a statement of certainty. All right, I kick the ball. It's present, indicative. It's an action that I am taking place. I'm making a statement. Now, the imperative would be kick the ball. Or you kick the ball, right? So kick the ball, that's a command. Now, an interrogative would be, did you kick the ball? Or will you kick the ball? And then subjunctive would be, I might kick the ball. Okay, I don't know yet. Not certain. All right, now for a verb of being, here's some examples. I am happy. Again, that's a statement of fact. It's a statement of certainty, of reality. It's indicative. Now, imperative would be happy. It's a command. Interrogative, are you happy? We don't know the answer to it, so we're asking the question. And then subjunctive would be, I may be happy. I'm not sure. Okay. Now notice, for the subjunctive mood in English, you'll often have these helper words, might or may or should or could or maybe. All right, so look for those. Those will help you see in English, because the verb kick, notice the verb kick is the same whether it's the indicative or subjunctive. So you wouldn't know if it's subjunctive without this helper verb, might or may. Okay? So that's what's going to help you in English to see the subjunctive mood. In Greek, you wouldn't see a helper verb. It would be embedded in the verb itself, the way the verb is written. But in English, the helper verb is what tells you. if the mood is subjunctive. Okay. All right. How are we doing? Questions on that?
So far, it's clear, Mr. P.
Okay. Okay, good. So we've talked about tense. We've talked about mood. There is one more. Oh, sorry. I have another example here. Let me just do that, and we'll. I just did another example. So verb of action. He preached the word. Okay, again, the tense is past, but the mood is indicative. It's a statement of fact, just making a declaration. Now, imperative would be preach the word. Interrogative would be, did he preach the word? And subjunctive, he might preach the word. And then a verb of being over here, he is blessed. That's a statement of fact. Be blessed, a command. Is he blessed? A question. Interrogative, he may be blessed. Now notice I said he may be, not may he be, but he may be blessed. All right. May he be blessed would be a request. All right, so those are some examples of another set of examples. Okay, so we have tense, which again describes gives reference in time to speaker. The mood gives, we would say, gives the attitude of the speaker to the statement. Okay. Is the attitude of the speaker in the form of a question? Is it in the form of a declaration? Is it in the form of a possibility, or is it in the form of a command? All right, what is the third characteristic?
Voice.
Voice, good. Voice now tells the relationship of the subject to the verb.
And
All
to the
right,
object.
and in English, there's two voices, active and passive. All right, so for example here, active voice, the action is done by the subject. I, subject, hit, action, the ball. That's active. The subject's doing the action. All right, these are for, this is for a verb of action. All right, we'll talk about a verb of being in a minute. Now, a passive verb of action would be the ball was hit. Now, in this case, the action is done to the subject. Okay, the ball here is the subject in the second sentence. And the action is done to the ball. Notice there's a helper verb, was. Okay, you have a verb of being in front of the main verb. I hit, subject doing the action, active. Passive, the ball was hit. So think of it this way. Active is, the subject is active. He's doing something. Passive is, the subject is just having something done to him. Okay? So that's the case here. Now, verb of being, we don't have action here, but the state or condition is being described. So an active voice with a verb of being would be I am happy. But a passive voice would be I was made happy. So something else made me happy. That's passive. Active would be just making the statement, I am happy. Okay? So again, usually with passive, notice, you'll see some kind of helper verbs in addition there, right? You won't just have the verb, you'll have something else to show you that there's another. So for example, in the form of a command, I could say, let's see. Fill the cup. All right, that's an imperative, active. The cup be filled. This is awkward, but now I have a passive command. Something's being done to the cup. The cup's not doing the action in this case. It is being done to it, but it's in the form of a command. And the implied actor is you filling the cup, but I didn't say it that way. If you remember a very famous passage, we talked about this a long time ago, is that be filled by the Spirit. You guys remember that from Ephesians 5:18? We had a discussion about that. And notice here, the verb is passive. It's a command, but it's passive, meaning that we have to do something to put ourselves in the place of having something done to us. We need to put ourselves in the place for the action to be done. But the action isn't done by the subject. Paul didn't say, you fill by the Spirit, or didn't say this, fill by the Spirit. He said, be filled. Very different meaning. That's why it's very important that you see this. All right. Be filled means the action is done to the subject because it's in the passive form. Note the helper verb be filled. Okay. Action is done to the subject. And what is the subject there? You. All right. It's not stated, but it's implied because it's a command. Whereas here, the action is done by the subject, in this case, you. See the difference? That word action is done to the subject in the first and the passive example, be filled by the Spirit. But the second one, fill by the Spirit, the action's being done by the subject. And here, that'd be a big difference. If the command by Paul was you fill by the Spirit, then Paul's saying you are the one filling something by the Spirit. Well, that's not even theologically correct, right? We don't command the Spirit to do anything. We don't use the Spirit to do anything. Really, the Spirit is, right? He is the third member of the Trinity. He's the one doing the action here. But Paul makes a command, so there's some sense that I have to put myself in the place to be filled by the Spirit. All right? So this passive is important. Even in commands, it'll show up. But just think about, is the action being done by the subject, or is the subject, the state being described, or is the action being done to the subject? Or is the state of the subject being done by someone else? Okay? Questions? I think I have an example here. Okay. Yeah, voice refers to the nature of the verb in relation to the subject. Now, I think I mentioned this to you guys before. In Greek, there is a third voice. And you'll have to know this because sometimes it'll show up in English in a certain way. So for example, in English, we have the active or passive voice. In Greek, we have active or passive, just like in English, and then also a third voice called middle. Okay, and if you remember, a middle voice is where the subject is doing the action, but he's doing the action to itself or for its own benefit. Okay, so the middle voice is kind of like active plus. Okay, it's the subject's doing the action, but the middle voice indicates the action's being done for the benefit of the subject or to itself. Okay, so for example, active voice, I gave a gift. Subject doing the action. I, subject, gave, action. Passive, the gift was given. In this case, the gift is the subject and was given is the verb, but the gift's not doing the action. The action was done to the gift. The middle voice would be, I gave myself a gift. Okay, it's still, I gave a gift, but notice by including this pronoun, myself, it indicates the intent of the action. The action was done to the subject. The subject did the action for himself. Now, in English, you won't see the voice, the middle voice in the verb, but sometimes in English translations, they will reflect a middle voice by including these pronouns, itself, myself, herself, himself. Okay, so if you see that, the idea probably is it's a middle voice verb. The verb is being done by the subject for the subject's benefit or to the subject. Okay, and just look for these what are called reflexive pronouns. That the pronoun with the s, the self on the end of it. All right. Questions? I know, nosebleed. Have your Kleenex with you. Have it ready. All right. Okay. So let's do a few examples together. I'll just have you guys indicate. All I want you to do is just, again, this is just so we can be reviewing this. James, we'll start with you. And all I want you to do is just identify the tense, the mood, and the voice. All right, of this sentence, the verb in this sentence. Well, first identify the verb, and then indicate the tense, mood, and voice. Okay. Make sure you unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. He will play cricket after school. Verb play.
Okay. The verb is play.
And then,
What is the tense?
in upper deck,
Okay, we've got the, remember the options here. I'll just put those down for you.
he will play. Okay. He will play after school.
Notice the that word will.
Yeah.
That's a helper word verb in English. It indicates, has the action happened yet?
Yeah.
Or is it going to happen? Is it going to happen in the future? Is it happening now, or did it happen in the past already?
Future?
Yeah, it's future. He will play. Okay. So it's a future tense. And what is the mood? And just ask yourself, is this a question? No. Is it a command?
No.
No. So what? Yeah, it's not a question, so it's not interrogative. It's not a command, so it's not imperative. And he's not saying he might play, saying he will play. So it's a statement of fact. Do you remember what mood that was? Here, I'll give you the. Yeah, good. Indicative. There's indicative, imperative, interrogative. If I can spell.
Subjunctive.
And subjunctive. Okay. All right. So this is indicative. It's a statement of fact, a reality, indicative. And then finally, what is the mood, voice, active or passive? Is the subject doing the action, or is it being done to the subject? So, yeah, if I look at the subject is he, right? So is the subject doing the action, or is the action being done to the subject?
The subject in the action.
He will do the action.
Yes. And that means it's
Active.
active. Very good.
Mm.
All right. So it's future indicative active. All right. Great, James. Thank you. All right. Pastor Allen, since you're the subject of the next sentence, I'm going to have you do this one. Pastor Allen is a good preacher. Again, identify the verb and then tell us the 3 characteristics of the verb.
The internet is
The
missing.
verb is
Yeah, the verb is. And what's the tense?
present.
Present tense. What's the mood? Remember our
The mood
options.
is indicative.
Yeah, again, guys, when you're thinking about mood, just ask yourself the questions. Is it a question? No, so it's not interrogative. Is it a command? No, it's not imperative. Is it a statement of fact or an assertion? In this case, yes, it's an assertion, so indicative. And then if we would see a might or a may or a could, then that would tell you subjunctive. All right, and then finally, is this passive or active?
Active.
Yes. The conditions being stated of the subject's not being given a condition, it's just stating the condition. So yeah, active. All right, good. All right, Pastor Arndt, we're gonna give you the next one. Identify the verb and then give us the tense, mood, and voice.
She might call her friend on the phone. The verb is call.
Good. And what is the tense, mood, and voice? What's the tense?
Present.
Yes. What's the mood?
Subjective.
Yes,
Subjunctive.
notice. Why did you say it's subjunctive?
Because of the word might.
Yeah, that indicates some doubt. We don't know if the action will happen. It may happen, it might happen. Okay, good. And active or passive?
Active.
Yeah, it's active. All right. How do we know? Well, again, identify the subject, which is she, and then ask yourself, is the subject doing the action or is the action being done to the subject? And here, she is the one who might call. So the subject's doing the action. So it's active. Okay. Now, if it had said she may be called by her friend, now the subject's not doing the action. Her friend's doing the action. The object is, or this prepositional phrase. So in this case, we still have a subjunctive because it's may, but notice the be there. Be indicates that the action may be done to the subject. See the difference? All right. So in the first sentence, both of these are subjunctive because both of them, right, have these the helper verb might there. Okay. But so both indicate the verb, the action is has some doubt. But in the first sentence, the subject will be doing the action. She will be calling. But in the second sentence, the action's being done to the subject. The subject may be called. All right. So for passive, look for that helper verb be, the verbs of being. Oh, here's another example. Okay, this is present tense. So this is present subjunctive passive. All right, and then the sentence that Arn had was present subjunctive active. Now, here, let me throw another one at you. What do you think of this one, Arn? If I can. She was called by her friend.
Okay. She was called by her friend. Verb is called.
Yeah.
Past.
Past now. And is this subjunctive? Is there any degree of doubt or uncertainty here?
I was called by my friend. Subjunctive.
Okay.
No.
Is there a degree of doubt? Do you see a might or a may in the sentence?
I sorry.
That's okay. So it's not subjunctive. So what are the other options?
It is indicative.
Yes. You got it. Very good. And is it active or passive? Did she, the subject, do the action, or was the action done to her?
Passive, pastor.
Very excellent. Very good. Now, let me twist it again. Sorry, Arn, I don't mean to pick on you, but all right, you're doing great. Let me change the sentence. She may have been called by her friend. All right, now I'm really, notice I added some more helper verbs. All right, we still have the main verb is called, right?
Yes.
I'll underline that. Underline the verbs here, the main verb. All right, so is this past?
Yes, pastor, past because of ed.
Yeah, she may have been, may have been called. So it's indicating a past event. Is this, what is the mood?
Mood. She may have been called by her friend. She may have.
Okay, what are we looking for? Just go through this in your mind. Is this a command?
Not.
No, so it's not imperative. Is this a question?
No.
No. Is this a statement of fact or reality? Is the speaker certain of the action?
Is that Kuan Pastor?
Notice the word,
subjunctive?
we have a little word there telling us about that. See that word may?
Is that
It's
subjunctive
subjunctive
Pastor?
again, yes. Because the speaker is not certain. That's why
And
the speaker
then-
says she may have been called by her friend. Okay?
Then passive.
Yes, it's still passive. That she is not doing the action. It's being done to her. Okay? So notice just the way the additional helper verbs are will tell you what's going on here. The verb of being, which I highlight in green here, tells you that it's passive. Okay? The word might or may, which I highlight in yellow, tells you it's subjunctive. And then, yeah, the ed ending may indicate past tense. However, be careful with that, because the way this one's worded, even though there's an ed ending, It actually is not past tense because the two helper verbs, she may be is present tense. All right, so this may seem a little confusing, but just try to think about, ask yourself those 4 questions. Is this a question? No. Is it a command? No. Is it stated with certainty? Well, here, she was called by her friend is stated with certainty. It happened. So that is indicative. But if it said she may be called, well, that's uncertainty. So that's subjunctive. Okay. Good job, Arn. This was a challenge. I gave you some challenging ones here, but very good. Okay, let's do another one here. Kazot, this is yours. Repent and believe in the God and believe in the gospel. Identify the verb or verbs, and then tell me what the tense, mood, and voice are.
Repent and believe.
Yeah, we have 2 verbs here, don't we? All right, let's start with repent. What is the tense?
Present.
Yeah, do it now. What is the mood?
Imperative.
Yeah. Is it a command? Yes. Being told to do something. What is the voice?
Active.
Yes. The subject, you, is doing the act, or you is being commanded. Okay. Now, what about believe? Any difference?
Same.
Yeah, it's the same. Present,
Because
imperative.
Because of the word and.
Yes, exactly. Oh,
Equal.
very good. Yeah. Yeah, good. That conjunction and tells you it's going to connect 2 grammatically equal words. So repent and believe. Now, Kazot, what if I had said this? Will you repent and believe? What about in this case?
Interrogative.
Yeah. So there, it's present tense, right? Still present,
Present.
but it's interrogative. It's a question now. All right. And then active. Okay. What if I had said, he may repent and believe?
Subjunctive.
Yeah. Still present, right? But now it's
Still present.
subjunctive. Subjunctive, active.
Active.
Okay, now here, let me throw a little twist for you. I picked on Brother Arn, so I'm going to pick on you now, all right? I pick on everybody. I try to be fair. Okay, so he was made. Let's see. He was, I can't do it. Let's do it this way. He repented and believed. How about this one?
Past.
Past tense. What's the mood?
Indicative.
Yeah, it's making a statement. Active or passive?
Active. Still active.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, great. Excellent. All right, guys, any questions so far on any of these examples? All right, Brother Alex, I'm going to give the next one to you. Just unmute yourself and let us know what the verb is and then the characteristics.
The church was filled with people.
Okay, the verb
The
is?
verb was filled.
Yeah. All right. Tense, mood, and voice.
Past.
Past, good.
And passive.
Passive, yes. And then what about the mood?
Indicative.
Yeah. Again, go through your mind with the questions. Is it a question? No. Is it a command? No.
Oh,
Is there certainty in the statement? Yes. Okay, then it's indicative. Now, what if I had said, will the church be filled with people? How about this one?
interrogative.
Yes, it's interrogative. What about the tense?
Present.
It seems like it, but it actually is still, yeah, you could say present tense because the verb here be, all right, is present.
Yes.
And then, as you said, it's interrogative. It's a question.
Yes.
And what's the voice?
Active. Active.
Okay, is the church doing the action or is the action being done? Because again, the subject is the church. So is the action being done to the subject or by the subject?
To the subject.
Yeah. So if the action's happening to the subject, that is passive, right? The subject's not doing the action, it's being done to the subject. All right, what if I had said this? All right, this might be kind of a funky way to say it, but church, be filled with people. Okay, I'm speaking to the church now, but yeah, it's a goofy sentence, but let's still, what's the tense, mood, and voice?
Present.
Yeah,
Imperative.
yeah, it's a command, isn't it? And is it active or passive?
Active.
Okay, notice the helper be there. So the church is not doing the action. It'll be done to the church. It's still passive.
Okay.
All right. Now you might see a statement like this, like in a poetic passage, right? Where remember that the figure of speech called personification, where sometimes an inanimate object will be spoken to. We see this in a lot of the prophetic texts, and even in poetry, like it'll say, let the mountains clap their hands, or let the seas roar. Okay, those are commands, and the subject is an inanimate object. So here in poetry, you might see something like this, where the church, even though the church is inanimate, or you could be speaking to the congregation, right? Church, instead of saying congregation, you may say church. Be filled with people. That's kind of an awkward sentence, but okay, very good. Let me see. I think I've got one more. Michael, I'm going to give this one to you.
Okay. That's present.
Okay, what's the verb?
Verb is read.
All right. What are the characteristics here? Tense.
Past, I think.
Okay.
Repeat
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. The verb read can be past or present. Past.
Past, top, and then indicative
Yes.
and active.
Okay.
Voice.
Now it's active, but notice I said in English, sometimes you may see this reflexive
Nice.
pronoun. So that may tell us that it is active, in the sense that the subject's doing the action, but here notice he's doing the action for himself. So it could be the middle voice in Greek. Just be aware of that. Okay. Now you can look it up in the interlinear and it'll tell you if it's active, passive, or middle. Okay. I'm just making you guys aware. Yes, in English, this will be active voice, but because if it's a New Testament passage, it could be Hebrew. Hebrew, there's also a verbal conjugation called the hithpael, which is reflexive, meaning that the action is being done to itself. I'll show you an example of this. All right. In Psalm 73, yes. When my heart was embittered and I was pierced within, can you guys see that? You guys see that here in Psalm 73, verse 21? I can't tell. Nobody's shoot. Let me put it here. All right, let's do this.
My heart was embittered and I was pierced within.
Okay, so here it looks like, I'll just stick with you, Michael. All right, let's look at the first line here. When my heart was embittered. Okay, what is the verb in that first line and what are the characteristics of the verb?
Oh, was embittered.
Okay, yep, that's the verb. Now,
Past.
tense, mood, and voice.
Past.
Yes.
Um,
Again, talk it out.
indicative.
Yeah, indicative, right? Because you ask,
Indicative.
is it a command? No. Is it a question? No. Is it a statement with certainty? Yes. This event took place. Now, what is the active, passive, or active or passive?
Passive.
Yes, passive. Now, here's where, very important, actually, in this case, it's actually middle voice that the type of verb that was used here in Hebrew is called a hithpael, which is reflexive, meaning it is a verb that the subject does to itself. It's an action the subject does to itself. So in this passage, actually, he's saying, I embittered my own heart. And then it's actually the same here. I was pierced, same thing. Now, the English translation, it doesn't come out that well. Let me go back to, let me see if any. Okay, can you see the scripture opened on the right side of your screen? Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, now let's see.
Yeah.
Now notice in the New American Standard, it just seems like a passive. So it seems like someone embittered his heart, right? My heart was embittered. But he doesn't say by whom. He just said it was embittered. I was pierced. All right, let me see, what does the ESV say? When my soul was embittered, when I was pricked in heart, okay? New King James. My heart was grieved, I was vexed in my mind. Let me see. All right, none of them Ah, oh, that's interesting. Can you guys see? This is called the Young's literal translation. Notice that one includes the reflexive pronoun. You see that? My heart shows itself violent, and my reins prick themselves. You guys see that?
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So that translation actually does a good job of reflecting the idea in the original that the action was done by the subject to itself. So it should have said, when my heart embittered itself. Or, and I pierced myself within. That's the idea here. So unfortunately, the translations didn't pick that up very well, except for that last one, which was the literal one. I wonder if the LSB does. Let's see what the LSB. Sorry, guys, I'm just curious. Psalm 73. No, it stayed with was embittered. It really should be when my heart embittered itself. Okay. Anyway, if you see those reflexive pronouns itself or myself, that'll tell you that the verb's likely a middle voice idea, but in this case, don't see it. Okay, so in the sentence I gave Michael, I read myself the book. Again, in English, technically it's active voice, but that pronoun myself tells you that if this were a New Testament passage being translated, then that would tell you that actually the voice was middle, that the action was being done by the subject to itself or for its own benefit. Okay.
Okay.
And again, the interlinear that we've looked at before would show you what the voice is. Okay, maybe I can show that to you guys. Again, remember, interlinear, go to Bible Hub. And let's see what passage. Middle voice. I wonder if. All right, interlinear. Okay, so if we look at the verbs here, notice you'll have, can you guys see that? I don't know if the font's big enough. Maybe I'll do. Here we go. Let's try this. Oh, it's not much different. Okay. Can you see that? Present, indicative, active.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can actually go into the interlinear and you can look at, just look for the verbs and you'll see for the V here, aorist, infinitive, active. Remember I told you in Greek there are different tenses. Aorist is one of them. This is an infinitive verb. Let's see, let's go down. Let me see if I can find a middle verb here. Okay.
Participle middle or
Yeah,
passive.
and it says middle or passive. Sometimes in Greek you can't tell if it's middle or passive. All right. But this is not passive, so it would be middle. So this idea of bearing with one another is done for your benefit. If I bear with you in love, that's not only benefiting you, Paul's saying here, it also benefits myself, the one bearing. Is an interesting point, right? So he's saying that we should bear with one another in love. And as we bear with one another, that not only does that benefit the other person, it also benefits you. When you bear with someone else, if the middle voice here indicates you're doing the action, but it also is being done, you're doing it for your own benefit as well. Okay, this is where the middle voice can have an effect in how you understand a verb. Let me see if I can find another middle voice. Okay, here's a passive one. Just as you were called, and notice aorist indicative passive. Look for a middle verb. Not a lot of middle verbs here. Let me see. Imperative. Sorry, guys. Trying to find. There's not middle verbs are
Yeah, working.
working.
Middle or
How little toil working. Now it's again a participle, but participles, remember, they do have verbal attributes. So in this case, it's present tense. Working with his own hands. So again, it's not passive because he's doing the action, but so it must be middle. So by him working with his own hands to do good for others, it also has a benefit for himself. Okay. Here's another one. Oh, it's imperative though. Okay. All right. Well, I guess you'll get the idea, right? That there's some middle verbs in Greek. And then in English, it will be reflected by usually this reflexive pronoun here: myself, itself, himself, themselves, something like that. Okay, well, I think I've made you guys suffer enough here. Hopefully that review was helpful. I'm hoping. Yes, it's hard to get away from grammar. I know I promised you we weren't doing diagramming, but I didn't promise you we wouldn't do grammar. Okay, so but it's helpful. You need to know what these verbs are doing.
yes.
It will significantly affect how you interpret a passage. Like I told you from that example with filled. You fill or be filled. That's a significant difference. Who's doing the action? All right. So, or like I showed you from Psalm 73, you need to understand that verb is reflexive. That verb is being done by the subject to itself. That's a significant theological point in that passage, because it's saying that when you're discontent, when you're embittered in your heart, you are the one causing your own embitterment. It's not someone else doing it to you. You're doing it to yourself. Right? That's a very important principle when you're counseling somebody who's bitter, because their tendency is to think, well, that person hurt me, that person sinned against me, they made me bitter. Well, no, they may have sinned against you and hurt you, but the bitterness is something you're causing to yourself. See the idea? Otherwise, people will never forgive. If they think that it's everyone else's fault, they made me mad, they made me hurt, they made me bitter, then that person will never gain victory over that issue in their life, because they'll blame it on somebody else, as opposed to, you know, yes, that person sinned against me, but I'm the one who got angry, or I'm the one who's bitter, or I'm the one who won't forgive. So it's significant how you understand of even just the verb, what kind of verb it is, can have a significant effect on how you interpret a passage. So that's why I wanted to go over this with you again, because as you go through a text, textual observation means go back and look at each of the verbs in your passage and identify the tense, the mood, and the voice. All right. And if you're not sure, you can always look at the interlinear. It will help you, hopefully, to give you some insight. All right. Questions? You guys have a headache?
Thank you for the exhortation, Pastor.
Certainly. All right. Well, we'll look at the rest of the observations, Lord willing, next week. And what I'm looking at here is we have just a few more weeks before in December, we're going to take several weeks off just for the holidays, also to give you time to get working on your sermons. All right. So next couple weeks, I hope to finish up just reviewing the last steps in the process, and then I'll give you guys some time to get to work on your assignments, okay? And if you have any questions, let me know. Oh, one other thing. I'll give you more detail next week, but because we are in module 3, normally for this class, since it is a class, Taya does charge tuition. Normally we would collect a tuition when we gather together, but with, you know, COVID and meeting by Zoom, we haven't done that. And I had failed to tell you about that at the beginning. If you have a hardship financially, there is scholarships available for that. But because this is part of a formal program where you will be given a certificate if you complete the program, Taya normally charges a fee in order to cover costs from Taya, particularly overhead and things like that. I don't get any of the money, but it does go to training, the Taya ministry for further training. So I'm just letting you know now. So if there is a financial issue, please let me know, okay? There's scholarship money available. We don't want that to be a problem. But we will need to collect content. Pardon me, Michael?
How much we're going to prepare?
I need to look that up. I think the class was 2,000, but
Okay.
let me confirm that. I don't think it was more than that. It may be less. I'll message you guys and let
Okay.
you know. All right. But if there is a financial need, again, just want to stress, please let me know. You can just tell me in private, message me, and that's fine. I don't want money to stop you from continuing in the class, but we do need to charge tuition for the course. All right. The stuff I did last year when we were reviewing narratives, and that was just, there was no charges, no tuition for that. That was just supplement. But for the actual next module, module 3, and it'll be the same for module 4, there is a tuition that comes with the course, okay? So you don't have to pay at this moment. I'm just letting you know ahead of time so you can look at your finances, see if there's a need, and then just let me know if there's a need, all right? And I'll let you know, hopefully by tomorrow, what the tuition is, but I think it's around 2,000 pesos. Okay?
Okay.
And again, I'm sorry about that. Pardon me?
Pastor Tim, how about this module? Has it been paid, or what's the status of the payment of this system?
Yeah, the costs have been covered already. So there isn't as much cost because there wasn't any travel and we didn't hand out materials. But we do, Taya does depend on tuition to cover expenses for other training. And so because there is training going on where there is travel and other things. So, and we also have guys that we are paying to help grade or to help with teaching and things like that in other locations in the Philippines. So it's like a regular school, right? Where tuition goes into paying for the expenses of the school. And so in our particular course, there wasn't that many expenses because we're doing it online. But the school, TEA itself, still has expenses that need to be paid for. So some of that comes out of the tuition for each of the classes. So some of the cost for this class has already been covered, but the tuition still needs to help cover other expenses. And some of those tuition fees are used to give scholarships to other guys as well, who have trouble paying. So I should have done this at the beginning of the course. I totally didn't realize that, so it's my fault. I apologize for the being tardy with that. But and again, just to stress, if the finances are a problem for you guys, for any of you, please let me know. All right, we'll work it out. Or if you can pay partial amount, that's great. Or if you don't think you can cover any of it, just tell me, because I know with COVID, everything has been much more difficult with finances. So that's why there is more scholarship money available for that. Okay. Yeah, Alan, you have a question?
What you meant earlier was for the next module. You said something about something like tuition or payment for the class. So does that mean for the next module after this?
Well, yeah, you guys already paid for module 1 and you paid for module 2 because we had those modules in person, right? But module 3 needs to be paid for. That's this module. And then, yeah, when we get to module 4, then there'll be a tuition for module 4. But module 3 needs to be, I need to get tuition for module 3. I failed to do that.
And it hasn't been paid.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, I'll have to find out how to make those payments. I think Taya has an account with BPI that you can send. I don't know the details.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Yeah, the money won't go to me. It'll go to Taya, the Taya account. If it goes to me, then I might go to Hawaii or something.
Ascertain.
Yeah.
Calculation. Just a calculation. How much will it be? I mean, if we will pay for
Well,
it.
let me see. I think it's 2,000 for module 3.
Pesos or what?
Pesos, yeah.
2006.
Yeah, not US.
Each one of us, ascertain? Each one of us or what?
Yeah, per person.
Okay, 2,000 per person.
Let me see.
I think we'll not bother it anymore because that's I think the church will subsidize for that.
Yeah, maybe Michael, you can look into that.
Yeah.
Um,
For everyone here, don't bother it anymore. The church will
Just
going to
make it
subsidize.
clear, Michael, that it's the church, huh?
Yeah.
Not anybody. Because you have to be clear, good.
After tonight.
Someone might get the glory.
Yeah, the church. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, okay, Michael, just let me know if you could confirm that.
Yeah. Yes, Pastor Tim. That's the partly
There's already a
obligation.
budget for that, man.
We allocated that
Yeah.
already.
Okay.
You just
Yeah,
don't know and when.
Sorry?
We allocated that already, Pastor Tim. We just don't know how and when
Okay.
and where.
Okay. Well, Michael, why don't you confirm and then you and I can discuss the details offline at another time.
Yeah.
with that, okay?
Uh,
All right, so anyway, that's it. So Michael, if you find out, then you can let the other guys know if everyone's covered or not, or,
Yeah, everyone is
Okay.
covered.
okay. So once you confirm that, you can tell me, and then, oh, here, probably shouldn't.
Thank you, Mike.